This guy says, I don't know how to shine shoes. And he got mad and said, we can hear everything through this wall, you know. And he said, well, he says, I order you to shine the shoes, which was an illegal order, but you're supposed to obey the order first and challenge it later. So, with this silence, about an hour later, we hear a big scream. And what's the big scream? This sergeant, private, whatever he was, you know what dubbing is? It's like a grease, and you put it on the outside of your shoes to make them waterproof. He had dubbed the inside of this guy's shoes with all this grease, you know, the shoes that he had bought himself. This guy was screaming and he says, I'm going to put you in jail and everything. This guy said, look, your order was to do it the best way I knew how. That was the way I knew how as a private, and that's it. Well, he went right up back to full staff sergeant again.
How's it coming out?
It's fine.
So, Saturday night, 2 days after the first interview.
November 27th.
November 27th. Okay, so you were saying that I was going to ask you something about what you said last time. You said that your father went to synagogue on the high holidays?
Yeah.
Which shul did he go to?
I forgot the name of the shul, but it was in near our house, 10 blocks away.
Which house was that?
The one on Patchen Avenue, McDonald Street.
Uh-huh.
And I went to Hebrew school there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
For how many years?
Well, till I was bar mitzvah.
Uh-huh.
And you know who else went to that Hebrew school?
Yeah.
You know?
Uncle Herbie?
No. Morris Denbo.
Oh, yeah? Same
Yeah.
Hebrew school?
Yeah.
I see. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So he grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, too?
That's right. His parents had a store, a stationery store, on Ralph Avenue.
Uh-huh. I see. So you went from the time, when did you start? What age were you when you started?
I don't remember.
You went for a few years?
A few years, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's not when you left. All right. So last time we were talking about your time in the Army, and we left off when you were in Texas, and we had that story of the guy who was cleaning out the boots.
Right.
So how long were you down in Texas for?
Oh, about 6 or 8 months.
6 or 8 months.
And then we went overseas.
Mm-hmm.
I went to India and then to China.
Mm-hmm. So where did you go first?
India, Calcutta.
India. Mm-hmm. You were stationed in Calcutta?
Right. Well, outside of Calcutta.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew the name of the town because all I could sign was an APO number.
Mm-hmm. But how far were you from Calcutta?
About a half-hour bus ride.
Mm-hmm. So did you get to go into
Oh,
Calcutta?
yeah, very often.
Mm-hmm.
You know my story about the rupee.
Why don't you tell the
Do
story?
you know the story?
I think I remember.
Yeah. Well, I went in one time and there was a guy on the curb and selling stuff. And I went to buy something from him and I offered him a rupee. And he says, I'm sorry, Sahib, I cannot accept this rupee. I said, why not? He says, this is a mutilated bill. I said, no kidding. You mean just this little corner over here? It's a mutilated bill and I can't. I said, this was 30 cents worth, of course. So I said to him, what am I supposed to do with a mutilated bill? He said, well, there's a procedure. You go to the Bank of India and there's a procedure for this, a mutilated bill. So I paid him with a different bill, and I was going around Calcutta anyhow, so I stopped off at the Bank of India, and I walked in. There was a tremendously high ceiling. The chandeliers came down, you know, and there were big lines snaking around, maybe hundreds of people. So being a very democratic person, I got on the end of one of the lines, and guy came over to me. He was in like a uniform. He was barefoot, but he was in a uniform with epaulets and everything. And he says, you have business at the bank? I said, yes. He said, oh, come with me. Apparently any Westerner, or especially somebody in uniform, didn't have to stand on a line. So I followed him. We went up a metal staircase to his first floor, and he knocked on the door, and he ushered me in, there was the manager of the bank. He said, have a seat, have a seat, and he rings a little bell, and the guy comes out with a couple of mint juleps. We drink the mint juleps, and we talk about the weather and about the war situation and things like that.
The julep is like a tea, or?
No, it's like a mixed drink. It's a
Uh-huh.
mixed drink, a julep, yeah. And that would be an expensive drink if you went to a bar. So he said, you have business with the bank? I said, yep. I got this mutilated bill, rupee note, 30 cents. He says, well, there's a procedure for that. And he takes out a big form, and he wants to know, he takes my name and my serial number and my APO number and where I got this bill and where I attempted to spend it and so forth. He fills out this whole form and he says, well, you sign, this information is correct. You sign on the bottom, and I signed, and he tore off a little perforated stub on the bottom, and he initialed it, and he gave it to me, and he said that was my receipt for the rupee note, and he said, you will hear from the bank, we're going to investigate this matter. So, about a couple of weeks later, I get a note at the finance office that the Bank of India has business with me, and I should appear at my convenience. So, I go back to the place. This time I just stand still. I don't get out of line. And this guy in the uniform takes me up again. Guy rings the bell again. We have another mint julep. We discuss the weather. We discuss the war. And he says, we have investigated this bill. It's not a forgery. It's not a stolen bill. And it's in good order that this bill is presented to us. And we are presenting you with a fresh minted 1 rupee note. He says, would you sign here? So I signed that I received the 1 rupee note. And he says, if you ever have business with the Bank of India, please come again. And it's our pleasure to serve you. I said, thank you very much. I could have changed that rupee note in the office anytime, I mean. But I wouldn't have had the fun of this whole experience.
I see. I thought you were going to tell me that story about where the table was covered with money. I
Oh,
didn't know
well, that's another story.
Was that in Calcutta?
That's in
too?
Calcutta too, yeah.
Well, you can tell that story.
Yeah. Well, we had terrible food in camp, and you better not
Yeah,
move
I
that
don't
thing.
think that's a good idea.
Better not move that thing. Take a chair from there, and then you won't go. Then you can go around me. Well, we had terrible food in camp, and one day, see, there were 4 of us. One of them was Vernon Foster, whom we've seen since. And he was from the Midwest. He had this sharp, dry sense of humor. So he was one of them. So we decided, we're going to go to town, we're going to eat like gentlemen. Cost being no object, we're going to go to a good hotel and get a good meal. And somebody said, well, the best hotel in Calcutta for food or for anything like that is the Great Eastern Hotel. So we go to the Great Eastern Hotel, we walk in, and they seat us at a table, and there's a place. Ceilings again very high, the chandeliers are all over the place. And the tables are seated like 1 room apart. It's not like a fast food place where everybody's at your elbow. So we sit down, they're given these big menus. And in between each section, they got, due to Bengal food laws, only 3 courses will be served. And in between each section, so this Vernon Foster says, number 1. So they point to him. With Bengal food laws, okay, number 1. They bring number 1. He says, number 2. Sahib, number 2. So they bring us number 2. Number 3. He says, Sahib, Bengal food laws. Well, these people understand perfect English because they're serving the British all this time. And he sort of says, like, Sato voice, so that maybe just he's talking to us and they don't understand. He says, it's too bad that these fellas here don't understand that if they give us this Bengal food laws and this and that, they're going to get no rupees for a tip. And if they give us what we want, doesn't have to be a big portion, a little bit of each numbers that we tell them, you won't see the table. It's going to all the dishes and the knives and the forks and the serving bowl. You won't see any of those. It's going to be all covered with rupees. Okay, so number 3,